The Soldiers of Ares, Chapter 15. Maximus was in deep sleep when it happened. He was dreaming about a giant sand serpent offering to buy his sword, and it was offering chocolate ice cream in return. He was tempted to sell too, but that's when Hedger woke him from his very weird dream. For a few seconds he was confused, but when he came to his senses and looked around, he saw that everyone was awake and staring at Hedger. Hedger, on the other hand, looked like he'd seen a ghost. "What's wrong?" Achilles asked. Hedger was still white-faced and shivering. "Well, there's a tank heading for us, just thought you should know." All of them stepped outside to see what he was talking about, and that's when Maximus saw it. Riding in from the direction they just came was a tank, and it wasn't just any ordinary tank either. Rumbling towards them with both its giant barrels aimed at them was one of Mars's most powerful weapons, RAM, tank. Along with the tank were 4 jeeps filled with Ares' soldiers. The jeep in front had its top down and a woman with blonde hair and a spear in her hand. She looked like she was shouting something, but Maximus couldn't hear her yet. But he knew one thing: Captain Deborah Sharp had just found them. "It seems like our old friend, the captain, has finally caught up to us," Rex said. "Man, she is not a happy lady. I for one can wait a lifetime before seeing her again, and it looks like she's bought a battalion," Hedger said. They all looked at Achilles for directions. He was stone-faced again. "Trying to take them all on will be suicide. Our best option would be to run and try and lose them in the city," he said. Without further delay, they started up the truck and began moving again. Achilles really floored the pedal and the truck was moving as fast as it could. Suddenly they heard an explosion on their side, one that could have easily leveled a building, then another one right behind them. The RAM tank was firing at them, and the tremors from its shots could be felt inside the truck. Maximus looked outside to see that the tank was too slow to catch up to them, but the jeeps were gaining on them. They were in shouting distance now. They started firing their machine guns at them, and now it was just the armor of the truck that was saving them. The only good part was the tank had stopped firing now, since it didn't want to hit the jeeps by accident. "Don't you guys have anything to shoot back with?" Achilles asked. "Sorry, but you sort of slashed up the only gun I had, remember?" Rex said, holding onto a wall so he wouldn't fall from the really shaky ride. "Maximus, take the wheel," Achilles said. "What?" Maximus said as if he was crazy. "Just drive and keep heading to the city wall. Let me see if I can do anything about those jeeps," Achilles said. With some difficulty, Maximus got into the driver's seat and took the steering. Achilles, on the other hand, kicked the window open behind them and jumped into the cargo hold. Maximus was trying to move the truck forward as steadily as he could, and it was not an easy task. Outside, he saw that the jeeps were right behind them now. In the back, Achilles took out the walkie-talkie again. He handed it to Hedger and said, "Keep trying to make contact with the city." Hedger nodded and went to work. Then Achilles drew his sword. It was glowing blue again, and it looked like he was charging it up for something. He turned to Rex and said, "On my signal, open the back door." Rex nodded and readied himself by the door. Daedalus had curled up in a corner again. It seemed to be his body's default response to danger. Achilles' blade was humming now, and blue sparks were coming from it. He steadied his stance the best he could by putting his metallic foot forward. "Now!" Achilles shouted, and Rex swung the door open. With a quick jab, Achilles sent a bolt of blue energy at one of the jeeps. It wasn't as grand as the one he used against the Manticore, but it did the trick. The bolt caught them by surprise, and one of the jeeps skidded off to the side. This repeated for a while, but Achilles couldn't get a clear shot because of the unsteady ride, and the jeeps were still on their tail. Hedger had been trying to make contact through the walkie-talkie all this time. Finally, the static cleared, and someone on the other side said, "Hello, haven't heard from this thing in a while." "Who is this? Over." It was a man's voice, that much was clear. He also sounded pretty cheerful. Well, hello, this is a friend of Achilles. Over," Hedger said. "So what can I do for you, friend of Achilles?" "Over," the man replied. Achilles took the walkie-talkie from Hedger and said, "This is Achilles. We are right outside the city now, coming through the desert trail." "Achilles," the man said, sounding excited. "It's been too long. How are you, man? And you're supposed to say over." Achilles let out a sigh and said, "Not now, brother. We are being chased by a barrage of Ares' men, including a tank, and we need entrance into the city. Should have known you wouldn't pay a quiet visit. What vehicle are you in?" "Over," the man asked. "A transport truck," Achilles replied. "Not to worry, I'll send word to the guards not to attack you. And I'll be there to greet you in minutes personally," the man said. "Much obliged, brother," Achilles said, and with that the walkie-talkie fell silent again. Maximus wondered who the man was. If he was someone who could call off the guards at will, he was certainly not someone ordinary. and Achilles had called him his brother, but the only brother Achilles had was killed in the Trojan War. The story was pretty famous. His name was Patroclus, and he was killed by the greatest warrior on the Trojan side, Hector. They say it was this incident which had driven Achilles with enough rage to challenge Hector in one-on-one combat and ultimately kill him. There was no way Patroclus was still alive. Then again he had believed that Achilles was dead until a few days ago. Achilles stepped forward to Maximus and said, "Just keep driving to the end of the trail. There should be a gate there, and we should be safe once we enter the city." Then he went back to try and slow down the jeeps. Captain Sharp's jeep was right by their side now, and Maximus could see the loathing in her eyes. That's when Maximus saw the guards to the gate entrance. He didn't know what he was expecting, and he wouldn't have been surprised if the guards were humans, minotaurs, or even a cyclops. But what he did not expect were a pair of giant freaking robots. The robots were huge, nearly 15 feet tall. They had 2 legs that ended in stumps. They looked like metal elephant legs. Their bodies were long and straight and only widened as they reached the shoulders. They had 2 arms, one of which ended in a kind of clamp that looked like a hand. The other one had a barrel at the end from the elbow down. They also had a motor or something on their backs with steam coming out of it. It made them look like they were wearing backpacks. Their heads had no mouth or nose. They only had one huge eye on them that gave a bright blue glow. Their head and body were bronze in color, while the arms and legs were made of steel. Also, they had their barrel hands pointed right at them. "Achilles, are you sure these guards are on our side?" Maximus asked, a bit worried. Achilles nodded and said, "My friend said they would be, and I trust him with my life." And sure enough, they passed through without much trouble. But when the jeeps came, the giant robots blocked their paths, and Maximus heard Captain Sharp shout into the radio, "Don't shoot the automatons, you idiots, unless you want to be responsible for starting a war between our countries." And the jeeps stopped behind the robots. But this still didn't stop them from shooting. For a second, Maximus thought that they were going to make it. But that's when he noticed something. "Guys, we have a problem. The gates are completely blocked, and I mean boarded up," Maximus said. The others came to see what he was talking about. Not only were the gates closed, but large wooden planks were also nailed onto it. It looked like it hadn't been opened in a while. "What do we do now?" Hector asked. "Well, we can't just stop now they're still shooting at us," Rex added. Achilles closed his eyes for a second to think. When he opened them again, he said, "We hammer through." "What, are you crazy?" Maximus shouted. "It's our best option," Achilles said. Maximus still wasn't sure of this, but he was still a soldier inside, and he knew that sometimes following orders was the best course of action. So he floored the accelerator and drove straight into the gate, praying that they survived. They crashed through the gate. Maximus first thought that the truck wouldn't go through, but it did, and they went on spinning out of control into the city. The truck slammed onto the tarred road and knocked over a lamppost. The truck came to a stop by itself without Maximus doing anything, and he was pretty sure that it probably wouldn't start again, even if he tried. Smoke was coming from the engine and it filled the driving seat. He expected the engine to blow up, but right then at that moment he did not care. However, nothing happened, and when the smoke cleared, he looked behind to see if everyone had survived. Everyone seemed to be alive, but all of them were on the floor breathing heavily. Achilles had sat up leaning against the wall, panting. Hector was still lying flat on the wall, laughing like a madman at the fact that they were still alive. Rex was untangling himself from their bags, which he had fallen into, and Daedalus had curled up into a ball with his arms around his legs, still in his corner. The scene at the gate had changed too. The 2 robots had completely blocked the gate now, and they couldn't hear any shooting anymore. It seemed the soldiers had given up and left for now. Finally, Achilles said, "Is everyone all right?" Everyone mumbled yes without any real energy. Maximus thought it was all over now, but when he looked outside, he saw something that made him think that the trouble had just started. 2 more of the giant metal robots, like the ones guarding the gate, were pointing their guns at them. And in their middle there stood a man. He was a big man, probably 7 feet tall. His skin was also extremely tanned, almost like he had been sunbathing for a year. He had copper-colored hair and beard, and looked a bit messy. He was wearing large boots with camouflage trousers. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt, which was covered in grease stains, on top of which he was wearing a bronze chest plate complete with shoulder guards. Maximus also noticed that he had a wristband with the yellow summoning crystal on his left arm. Then he took out something from his back pocket. It was a walkie-talkie, and the man started speaking into it. Achilles' own walkie-talkie lit up again. The man's voice came from it and said, "If you're in this steaming truck in front of me, please do respond, buddy. Otherwise, we're gonna light it up like a firecracker. Over." Achilles grabbed the walkie-talkie fast and said, "Don't shoot, it's us." A smile appeared on the man standing outside, and on his signal the robots lowered their guns. Then the man came to the back of the truck and ripped the back doors open. He literally ripped out the doors with his bare hands and threw them to the side. Then he put his grinning face inside and said, "Well, what are you waiting for? Come give me a hug." This has been a chapter from Book 1 of the new World Odyssey series, The Soldiers of Ares. Links to the books in the bio. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you in the next chapter.